speaking about failures of movies, next up, we have the Marvel classic Jack Frost 2, Revenge of the Mutant Killer Snowman from 2000. Now, we spoke about the first Jack Frost a few shows ago. It's pretty recent. And I think we both had pretty similar opinions on that one. This one uses the, sort of follows up from the story a year later. At the end of the first Jack Frost, they buried the antifreeze which had destroyed Jack Frost. And then it's discovered, and through some scientific mishap, Jack Frost is able to return and get his revenge on Sam's character, who is taking a second honeymoon, I think, with his wife on this sort of like a tropical island type place. So it's Jack Frost in a warm climate for a bit. This movie really amps up the silliness and the I don't know, the sort of a stupid comedy. The first movie had a bit of that, but this movie really went balls to the wall. And if you're familiar with my my sense of movies, I don't care much for that type of style. I remember when I first saw this movie, I gave it a 1 out of 10. And I saw it again, and I don't think it's quite that bad, but I'll be honest, I don't think it's that much better. And I have some more specific complaints about some of it, and some of it's, I think, somewhat valid too. But before I touch that, what are your views on this one?
Yeah, I remember watching this one a long time ago, maybe a couple years after it came out. And the only thing I could ever remember really from it was like these ice cubes craving to get on this hot chick's nipples or something.
Of course, that's the thing you would remember.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't recall liking it back then. I watched it again. It's definitely nowhere near as good as the first movie, and there's a lot of different reasons why. I don't think it's as bad as I was anticipating it to be upon rewatching it, but it's still definitely on the more mediocre side. I mean, it starts out with this super widescreen. I don't even know why, or why that was necessary, but they decided to do it. And then after, I mean, well, the funny thing with that opening scene is, I actually think the story he's telling about Jack Frost would be hilarious had you not, or like, had the first movie not existed, because hearing, I think the moment where he said, "Now tell me how you killed him," and he says with antifreeze, that is actually really funny, I think. But, I mean, considering we already know that from the first movie, it kind of deflates the humor in it a little bit. And then we go to the title screen, or the font. You know, Jack Frost 2, but then they've got the Return of the Mutant Killer Snowman in this this font that I see used in so many places. Even local businesses in my area use that font. I mean, it's not the most it's like the most common speciality type font, I think, at least back around that time. It just feels so cheap, and that's how this movie feels at times, at least compared to the other one. It feels cheaper. Obviously, I'm guessing it had a lower budget. I didn't look at the budgets or anything, but it just feels overall like a lower quality movie. Not that the first movie was extreme quality, but yeah, there's a lot of different reasons why this one pales in comparison. And I'll mention a few other things, but just so I stop talking for a little bit, what else did you want to say about this one?
Well, a big issue for me, and leaving the comedy aside, once Jack Frost gets to the island to exact his revenge, he has a pretty decent scene where he sort of slaughters a bunch of people who are having like a snowball fight. I mean, it's a tropical island, but he was able to sort of transform the local water to like a more wintry climate to suit him, which is fine. I didn't mind that. So he has a scene where he slaughters a bunch of people, which I think was an okay scene. And then he sort of disappears for like 20 minutes, and then it's a bunch of like baby snowball type things, which are the main problem. And they actually dispatch one of the main characters, actually it's a recurring character from the first movie, played by a different actor, but it's still a character from the first movie. That whole part, I mean, I was already having issues before that. Like the whole ice cube scene, like, it's like, maybe if I was a kid, I'd be a bit more amused by that. But it just, I was watching it. I mean, I was watching it by myself, but I was still cringing, like, through most of that. It's just so ridiculous, and like I said, it's not my style of comedy. But when they're trying to deal with like the baby snowball thing, and it's like, oh no, that's not very nice. Don't do that. it was a struggle to get through. Like, it was just difficult.
Yeah, the addition of the little snowball creatures, or whatever you want to call them, throughout or towards the end of the movie, kind of felt like they were trying to. Well, it's kind of like Gremlins, but
Yes.
with much shittier type, effects and creatures, or whatever you want to call them. Yeah, just, it's a perfect example of comparing something that's cheaply done to something that's of much better quality.
If there's one thing I do want to mention that I like about this movie, I do think that it follows the first movie pretty well. And what I mean by that is it uses story elements from the first movie that like the weakness that Jack Frost has in this movie. It sort of makes sense in context to the ending of the first one. And I do like how they sort of used the first one to dictate how this one should go. It's a bit more consistent than what you might expect. And I do appreciate that. And I do appreciate how they showed them digging up the antifreeze, and instead of just it happening to be in a scientific laboratory, it shows them getting it. So, I mean, I like the consistency. It's just that the story that they went with, like, I'm not sure, that scene toward the beginning, like, there's two guys on a lifeboat, like, arguing over it. I think it was it a banana? It was, carrot. It's a carrot. Like, talk about the completely unnecessary scene.
Yeah, they were struggling at times, I thought, to really figure out the best way to move forward with the movie, but I think my biggest issue with why this movie is not nearly as entertaining as the first is that Jack Frost himself, I mean, we hear his voice constantly throughout the movie, but we don't really see him as the Snowman much, and that's the form, like, I guess his traditional form that people know him by and would like to see him as. So if they showed him more as the actual Snowman rather than just, some ice cubes or some liquid with some voice, maybe, just maybe, that may have made things a little bit easier for me to enjoy.
Yeah, actually, and just to show that my hatred of this movie isn't, like, complete, I also sort of liked the sort of element of the main character having sort of like a PTSD type thing. Like, he can't, anytime he thinks of snow, Christmas, he just, sort of freezes up, pun intended. And like, there's a point in this movie after he first tries to defeat Jack Frost and it doesn't work, he almost sort of becomes pretty useless. I mean, he sort of comes back in the end, but from that point on, it's more his wife that is a lot more of the individual who tries to get things done, which I thought was a sort of interesting change. I don't think it's entirely a great change, but I thought it was interesting. But all of that aside, I think the movie is just a lot weaker, which is disappointing because even though the first movie wasn't amazing, I think it had a certain charm to it, which this movie, I mean, there's a few funny characters. The old, well, I don't know, I forget what the guy's name is, like the guy who was running the resort. He had a few funny lines. I sort of liked Captain Fan when he jumped into the bath. Hey guys, so he was over the top. He's sort of funny, but otherwise, I don't know if there's that much going for this movie unless this humor is the type of stuff that appeals to you.
I mean, the lead. The lead in the movie, Christopher Allport, who plays Sam, I kept thinking, I've seen this guy in other things other than the first Jack Frost movie. I was having a look through his IMDb. I didn't notice too much, but I did notice he was in Dead and Buried. He plays the guy at the beginning of the movie that gets burnt alive. I don't know, just kind of thought I'd mention that because I know you really enjoy that movie. I don't know if you recognized him from that.
Actually, I did not. Oh, hey, you are. I'll be honest. Now that you mention it, it does sound familiar. His face in the beginning of that. I'll say that and Buried's a fantastic movie, and I had no idea this guy was in it. So, well done to Christopher Alport. It's a shame he died.
Yeah. Now, I guess the other question to ask about this movie is, does it, in your mind, qualify as being labelled a Christmas movie?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. So I definitely think it would qualify as sort of like a winter movie. Even though it was a tropical island, obviously once it was out snow covered, I think that sort of qualifies it. I don't think there's that many Christmassy things in the movie. At least not in my opinion. I mean, I know some people see snow and automatically think Christmas, but I don't believe Christmas came up all that often, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I know they did play like a Christmassy type song a couple of times throughout the movie, but
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, which was horrible on a side note, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like, I mean, if somebody wanted to count this as a Christmas movie, I probably would argue with them. I mean, by all means, if you were to count this in any type of list, more power to you. But I probably wouldn't. I mean, I have no problem counting the first movie, but this one, it doesn't feel nearly as strong a connection.
yeah.
And I think a lot of that might be because, like you mentioned, we don't see him in a snowman form all that often. Like, if he saw him in that form, like, throughout the movie as opposed to just maybe 3 or 4 scenes, maybe you'd feel, I guess, a lot more authentic, but it just, we didn't get that. I did want to say that if there's one positive kill in this movie, I did like the tongs in the eyes. That was okay. But other than that, most of the other kills, I mean, being stabbed with an icicle is fine, but the whole like turning himself into an anvil and falling on that girl after trying to drop coconuts on her head, yeah, that was another difficult scene. And I mean, I'll just go ahead and rate this. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't come into this one expecting too much because I remembered too much about it from the first time I saw it. I actually think the opening is pretty funny, but it's just, the movie's just so much sillier than the first one is. And it's just disappointing. I'm going to give this one a 4.5, and I'll be kind enough to round up to a 5 out of 10, but it's definitely a movie that's below average, and there's a few enjoyable characters, a few enjoyable, funny scenes, but overall, there's so many other movies I'd rather watch than this.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it this way. This movie came out the same year as Battle Royale.
Well, I'm going to give it a 5, and that's actually a little bit higher than I was anticipating, which, I mean, 5, I think, is still an extremely mediocre rating for a movie. I know some people out there, their scales might be different, and they see 5 as an average movie, but, for us, an average movie is more around 6 or a 7. So it's definitely below average. I still did have some fun with it. I did find myself giggling at certain things throughout the movie. It's just that the quality of the movie just dips and dips and dips throughout. It is a ridiculous movie overall, so you don't tend to give it as much grief over having terrible effects and things of that nature as you would if you were talking about something more serious. But at the same time, you can just see that this is just, it's just a shitty movie with terrible effects, and it's saved a little bit by the fact or by the reputation of its first movie and having some of the same people return for this second movie, but yeah, it's definitely not something I can see myself wanting to watch again, if anytime soon. But I guess one thing that I should also mention is that they really go to great lengths with the product placement for that beer. Because the funny thing about it is, whenever I go to the theaters these days, I actually see an ad for that specific beer before almost every movie I watch. I had no idea it was around back 20 years ago, making appearances in Jack Frost 2 of all things. This Japanese beer or whatever it is.
It's funny because I actually had no idea that was a real beer until just now.
Yeah, they have a very serious type ad of this Japanese businessman drinking one of these, at least in the theaters that I go to, but yeah, I was surprised to see it was around back then. But looks like they're ahead of the game, and they've been using movies for 20 years to advertise their beer.
If I was them, I'd recommend using better movies.
Well...
Although, to be fair, if you're watching Jack Frost 2, maybe you would like some beer to help you through it.
Plus, I'm guessing they didn't charge them much to appear in the movie, because the effects don't look like they used all that much money.
Yeah, it is... I mean, it's sort of what you would expect from early 2000s movies, but it just looks so aged.
Yeah. Well, around this time we were getting a lot of shitty, like, straight-to-DVD movies, and, you know, so around this time you would see a lot of stuff of this quality hitting the shelves.